Welcome to Inner Tapping with Kathy Vartuli.
And Rick Wilkes from thrivingnow.com.
So, what is inner tapping, Rick?
Well, inner tapping is when you imagine tapping on the you that existed at some point in the past while you physically tap on yourself in present time.
If you need some help with basic energy tapping or EFT, visit www.thrivingnow.com/tapping.
Kathy, there's a lot of techniques that people use with tapping to help relieve trauma that is stored in the body mind. One of the things that we're attracted to with inner tapping is that it works a little differently than, let's say, the tell the story technique or the movie technique. Why
Yes.
is that?
It seems to access directly the moment in time when we learned a certain lesson. My experience, I think for you as well, and a lot of our clients, it's very powerful. It seems to unfreeze and release at a deeper level.
Yes, and I think one of the things we've noticed in group work is it tends to allow all of us to join together
Yes.
in helping this inner child or younger you. It brings us in a place where we feel more empowered to help, going back in time, so to speak, to rewrite history. And in that way, it creates feelings of empowerment on the part of not only the client, but also the other people that are observing. We can feel like we're a participant in going in and helping release this trauma.
Yes. I think also because the energy, the fear, the alone, disempowered feeling is displaced onto the younger self, the adult that's doing the tapping can feel much more empowered. It gives them a sense that they can help rather than being completely stuck in the feelings. It helps reduce the intensity of the experience. So, in terms of where inner tapping came from, inner child work has been around for decades. They haven't been combining tapping with that until just recently. And I worked with Shirley Jean Schmidt, who introduced the concept of mirror neurons to inner child work. We'll talk a little bit more about that later.
Carl Dawson also is one of the leaders in this. And while he creates a slightly different metaphor around this concept of tapping on previous traumas, we definitely consider him one of the leaders in this type of inner tapping work.
He does beautiful work. And we also learned a lot from neurologist Dr. Robert Scare. He's done a great deal of research into how the body and mind store and release trauma and how it affects our current life.
So I think it's useful for us to look at how the brain stores information. And it does so in a couple of ways. The primitive brain files things under safety and danger because that's its
Yeah.
responsibility. It's survival of us as a living organism.
And our cognitive brain stores rational thoughts about events once it's had a chance to process them. One important note is if an event is frozen from trauma, the cognitive brain doesn't have a chance to look at the event and decide rationally what happened. So it kind of gets stuck in time.
And one of the things that we've noticed is that the inner child will be asking why. There
Yes.
will be a lack of understanding. And that's one of the things that you bring to that younger you in this process is that adult, mature, cognitive awareness. It frees up that why?
Yes.
Why is this happening to me?
It's beautiful to watch the shift in energy as that understanding comes into place.
Now, you introduced me to mirror neurons, and can you give us a brief description of what they are and what they do?
They basically store videotapes of important incidents. And the more important an event appears to be to survival, the more intense or detailed the videos might be. And this allows us to learn from our own and others' experiences without having to do it ourselves. For instance, if we see someone break their leg, we can get the experience of it without having to do it ourselves. Very useful. But we incorporate this into our system, and sometimes it will hold us back.
So, for example, if you saw something happen in a negative way, you might create a fear of doing something similar yourself,
Right.
even though the situation may not be the same.
Correct.
You see someone jump off a table and they break their leg. Well, you may never want to jump off a table,
Hmm.
even if you wouldn't break your leg doing that because you weren't drunk and crazy and trying
Right.
to show off, right? But
Yeah.
your body, your brain would be saying, no, no, this is unsafe because of this videotape that we have stored in our
Right.
mirror neurons.
Right. And our primitive brain seems to be affected by these videotapes. It makes sense, logical. Our primitive brain's main purpose is to keep us alive. And if it sees something dangerous, it's going to avoid it. It's going to try to protect us from it. And the primitive brain has first access to our body's responses and can overwhelm any other rational thoughts and feelings if it thinks we're in danger.
Yeah, it has a direct lever onto those fear chemicals, the adrenaline, the fight, flight, and freeze energies.
Just to tell you a little bit more about mirror neurons, research is ongoing, but they've found that they are a very powerful way for higher mammals to learn from seeing what others do. Our brains start copying important memories and internalizing the feelings, actions, and events in our lives. For example, if we are watching our mother gather food or our father pay the bills, we're internalizing that lesson, the energy around it, the way they handle it. So if our father is swearing and cursing about paying the bills, we're internalizing that video. That's a how-to video in our heads on how to pay the bills. You must be frustrated, you must use swear words, and you have to be unhappy. Everyone else has to leave the room. That's our how-to video.
Yeah. And so realizing that it's not just a video, it stores all of the different channels as well of the energy of the situation, the
Yeah.
emotion that's being present. So it's video and soundtrack and sights and smells and all of the energy that's present, including the energy that's unspoken.
Yes.
The core energy, is the person relaxed and peaceful, or is this something that is stressful and difficult?
And I think it's important to notice that the mirror neurons are not a bad thing. They gave our ancestors a huge advantage. If they could learn without having to do it themselves, without having to make all the mistakes along the way. So they're a very beneficial thing, but they just store what they see. They're not evaluating and deciding, I should store this, I don't need to store that. But we can tap and release the energy around certain videos so they don't really play anymore and we're not affected by them.
And we're turning this into a conscious evolutionary advantage. We're taking the capabilities of our body mind and learning to leverage them consciously through an action like going back and taking a movie that is not something that we want to keep playing and having accessed in our library, that's
Mm-hmm.
impacting our life in a negative way, and releasing that, rewriting our mirror neuron history, so to speak, so that that is no longer being carried forward in our life. That's why we're doing this, so that we can be free of old stuff.
And that's incredibly empowering.
So, what is stored? Well, some of the studies that are coming out are showing that the more critical the task is to survival, the more quickly it gets stored in the neurons, and that activities that are repeatedly seen are recorded, as well as even a singular traumatic high intensity event, which gets a special red flag on it.
And then if we're in a situation that reminds us of that of a previous event, that's pulled out of the video library and it's that memory is activated.
Now let's talk about triggering, Kathy. What is meant by triggering?
To me, it means that I am suddenly in a state of alert and fear or very prepared to take some action. And it may not be related to what's going on. I might just be reminded of something that happened in the past.
So the energy of an old traumatic memory can cause the recall of that
Yes.
into our current present energy system, right? We literally remember, we become the energy that was appropriate from that old video, even if it's not directly related, right?
Yes. So if we were in a fire, for example, and we're very afraid of the smell of smoke, our primitive brain learned smoke is dangerous. And we're near a barbecue on a summer picnic, we could get triggered by the smell of the smoke. Our primitive brain can decide danger and give us all kinds of chemicals, so we're very fearful, we're reacting strongly.
We've seen this with clients. I had a client who was triggered by the smell of Desitin because she had a traumatic event occur to her when the smell of Desitin was present. Until she released the connection between the smell of Desitin and something bad is going to happen to me,
Hmm.
it was very triggering for her to be around that smell. Once she released that, there was no trigger. It was gone. But, there's nothing defective with someone. In fact, it shows that their whole brain is working the way that it was designed when they
Yes.
make that connection. What has been missing is the conscious disconnecting and the way to reach that part of our brain, that part of our body. And that's one of the theories about what tapping does is it helps us to reach more deeply into the body mind to make the disconnect because clearly just thinking about oh Dustin is not the problem here is not sufficient because the
Yes.
body's still being triggered. And that's what we're doing here is we want to reach the triggering energy rather than just consciously thinking there's nothing wrong with this. Well, your body's not convinced yet.
Yes. And to take that analogy further, when that person who was afraid of Desitin smelled Desitin, the video of the trauma would probably replay in her mind, and that triggers the primitive brain more. So you have a feedback loop that's going on, and that can lead to panic attacks and strong, overwhelming feelings.
And I want to make it clear that the video replaying sometimes can be on the subconscious level.
Yes.
We as humans are able to block memories that are disturbing to us, but we don't necessarily block them playing out vibrationally
Yes.
in our in our physiology, in our vibration in terms of the law of attraction as well, which we'll talk about a little more.
Yes. So the videos can play out subconsciously, and for people that had some people who have had intense trauma will also have flashbacks where the video will play so clearly that it feels like it's happening again to the body.
Right.
So we have a previous video on trauma where we talk about three types of survival mechanisms: fight, flight, and freeze.
And you can look at that video at thrivingnow.com/trauma. What it notes is that when we feel trapped and we're unable to save ourselves by either fighting it out or running away,
Mm-hmm.
we freeze. And this is one of the key points. There's been a lot of talk about the fight or flight reflex. I had not known it as the fight, flight, or freeze reflex. And it is this point where we freeze in time that our brain seems to and body seems to store this trauma because we're at risk of dying. Now, normally the freeze is discharged, but we human beings, as we talk about in that trauma presentation, we're good at saying, pull it together, big boys don't
Yeah.
cry, it's okay, stop shaking. Now, those are normal, healthy trauma discharges to shake and shiver and be comforted by another person, but we're pretty good at getting rid of that. Well, what happens to those energies if we don't discharge them? They stay.
And one thing that seems to happen is if we're frozen and not discharged, the cognitive brain never gets a chance to look at the memory, never gets to rationally say, oh, this is a barbecue, not a house fire, for example. Desitin is not related to the pain I felt. So until it's unfrozen, it's very hard to look at it rationally and behave rationally.
Right. So just to review here, because it's so important, when we freeze from trauma, we're either going to discharge the energy and heal, or we're going to have some aspect of ourself that is remaining stuck in that frozen energy. And if we don't discharge the energy, we often disassociate and push away that part of us that was traumatized. That includes your hip, your knee, your
Yeah.
pelvis, your genitals, your throat. You're creating an energetic barrier, literally creating a separation between you and you. And
And
that's where so much of disease and distress comes from.
And a lot of people seem to think that disassociation is a bad thing all the time. It really is a survival mechanism. It's very important. If you are running from a bear and you scraped your leg really badly on a rock, you don't have time. You can't tell the bear, oh, time out while I wrap this up. You have to keep running. You have to go through the pain. And disassociation allows you to block out that pain, to run away, and later, once you've escaped, you can tend to it. Unfortunately, humans tend to have large disassociations that they've never learned to tend to. So large parts of their life are blocked out.
I think that's why so much of the healing work that's happened around sexual trauma, things that had to be kept secret,
Yes.
have a special category of trauma because you can't tell another person because you may have been threatened. And
Hmm.
so One of the things that we're saying here is that regardless of where the trauma comes from, if you feel like you didn't get a chance to properly release the trauma, then this may be something that you want to look at, an approach that can bring you relief and free up that energy.
So when part of us is frozen, the event is stored as current and active in the brain.
What do you mean by that?
Our subconscious doesn't know the difference between past and present, at least according to many studies and the experiences of a lot of people. So until the cognitive part of our brain has a chance to analyze it and put it in the past, it's still running as current in the subconscious. So the primitive brain is not able to update any information about this, and the mirror neurons keep getting triggered to run a video of the trauma. It's ready to run anytime the energy feels similar.
And so, one powerful way to access this energy, and it's still running, right,
Mm-hmm.
is to imagine the younger you that lives on in that memory
Mm-hmm.
and do some tapping with that younger you, as well as maybe tapping on anyone or anything that also is present in that memory and that also still has an emotional intensity to it.
People often ask, how fast does inner tapping work? In our experience working with clients, a single incident can be generally worked through in about 10 to 15 minutes. More complex and repeated traumas will take longer to process, but even reducing the intensity around one specific event can bring a lot of relief and hope.
And that's an important thing. Many of us who had a very traumatic time in our life would say, oh my goodness, if I have to go back and tap on every single younger me that went through a difficult time, I will do nothing else for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
Well, what we notice is the generalization effect that, it's like the category of I'm sitting and playing and having a good time and then something bad happens. There may be a dozen different experiences where that was a very traumatic experience to be going from happy and fun to, oh my God.
Yeah.
But if you tap on one, two, or three, they tend to generalize together. And that's one of the things that we notice with this inner child, inner tapping work is that the generalization seems to be even broader
Mm-hmm.
because you're interacting with a part of your intelligence, yes, that got stuck asking why at a particular point. But by interacting with that and developing a relationship and helping to explain and teach and comfort and bring relief, well, now you also, as an adult, have developed an empowered skill of bringing relief to yourself.
And that scared inner child who has been holding you back can suddenly become a resource you can turn to. And that's one of the most beautiful things about this. As we've said before, it's also often less triggering since we're tapping on the younger you that has the feelings and memories. They're not being stored and held in the adult body while we're doing the tapping. That can reduce the intensity deeply.
It doesn't necessarily mean that when you see your suffering self at 3 years old, that you may not want to cry or actually
Right.
cry. And that's an important point to make. It's not about not feeling emotions. It's not about displacing it so that you are just this disinterested scientist. You're bringing all of your resources, your compassion,
Mm.
the wisdom that you've gained by actually being the one to have endured all of that. You're bringing all of those resources to the situation. And if you're working with a professional, guess what? You're bringing your resources and the professional's resources together to help this energy, this inner child, this younger you move forward.
It's very powerful.
It's important to remember that traumas, by their definition, are intense.
Mm-hmm.
And so, even though tapping and particularly inner tapping is a great way to clear that intensity permanently in most cases,
Yeah.
do take care of yourself while you're in this process. If you're under the care of a mental health professional, or you really should be, you can do tapping with that person. Many professionals today have been trained in tapping as EFT, TFT, MTT, what have you, and they would welcome, the right practitioner for you will welcome you bringing resources to the session to help you find permanent relief.
Make sure to get help if you're not sure whether you should move ahead or not. This can be intense, but it's well worth the effort. And if you do it yourself or with a professional, take it slow and make sure you have some calming resources available if you're going to do the work. We have some grounding exercises at www.thrivingnow.com/grounding that can help.
So, tapping on the younger you. We're going to be connecting with a part of you that's been frozen, quote, back then.
Hmm.
And so you can discharge the trauma that way. Going to be helping the primitive brain and the mirror neurons change the way that they are holding the information from that event. And this is going to help your primitive brain become more resilient and flexible. It will treat fewer things as if they require the red alert anymore.
We're also going to be changing the video in the mirror neurons so they no longer trigger the primitive brain to terror every time something remotely reminds us of the earlier event. So let's go through an example on inner tapping. Let's say at 3 years old, a little girl is playing with her mother. She's really happy. She's feeling so loved. They're playing with her new teddy bear, which she just thinks is the cat's meow. And her father comes home and he sees the new toy. He had a really bad day at the office and he really resented missing out on time with his beautiful daughter. So instead of dealing with it directly, he starts yelling at his wife for wasting money on useless objects. That little girl might decide that playing, laughing, and getting new presents is bad. She hears her father yelling, she loves him, she wants him to be happy. She knows that his care and attention is very important to survival. And that new toy seemed to cause a dangerous disruption in her family. At 3, family is necessary for her to survive. So, as an adult, every time she wants to buy something fun for herself, she may see a video of dad yelling. As an adult, she can struggle with money issues. Maybe it's not safe to have too much money because she might buy something for herself. And she may have trouble enjoying things that money can purchase.
Okay, so it would be great if situations like that never happened,
Mm-hmm.
but they do. In many ways, growing up as a child, even in a great family, there are times when mother, father, uncle, grandmother, they're in distress themselves. They're not emotionally balanced. Something will come up. And so if we take a situation like that, whether it happened for this girl once or 100 times, what we'll do is ask some questions and remember how it felt when the event happened. And the way we do this with inner tapping is have the person picture the 3-year-old child, her 3-year-old self. Now, sometimes that's easy, sometimes it's not. So we ask some questions. Well, how old is she? Well, she's 3 years old. Where do you see her? What is she wearing? And then we start asking some questions about the emotions.
For example, what is she seeing or feeling? Where is she feeling that in her body? By tuning in that way, it helps people reconnect with that earlier event so that we can process it more easily.
And while you're remembering those things, if you just want to start tapping yourself, tapping your collarbone, tapping any point on your body to bring yourself some relief as you start connecting with that feeling.
And we always like to get permission. A lot of earlier traumas are a result of not having boundaries. So getting permission, getting a yes from the inner child is an important part of helping them feel empowered again.
And listen to their no if they're not ready to be tapped on. And again, this is the relationship between you and you. And one of the things we've noticed is that when we work with a client, sometimes the child won't necessarily trust the adult self coming and helping. It
Yes.
happens rarely, but when it does, it's sometimes nice to invite, even in your imagination, a helper, a friend. And the teddy bear could come and tap.
Yes.
You can use this is part of using your creativity and your imagination to bring yourself relief. But if the child is saying no, wait for a yes. In the meantime, you can be tapping on yourself for how you feel, even though this child is really upset, and that makes me feel so sad. I deeply and completely accept all of my feelings. And you can do some rounds of tapping as you're just picturing this situation yourself. So there's always something that you can do. You can always be doing some tapping.
Sometimes when the inner child gets to experience the energy of you tapping and sees that it's safe, They might be willing to have tapping done on them. You can have someone else tap on the child, or you can just comfort the child. What would they want right now?
And that makes a good point. Part of making the situation safe and comfortable for the child can be freeze framing everyone. So it's only just like you and your inner child who are moving and able to react. They may feel cold and need a blanket, or they feel like they want to move away from the other person that was causing the distress.
Another great way to comfort them is offer them something warm or cool to eat or drink. The primitive brain feels safer when we do that. It kind of circumvents some of the panic cycle. If you were in danger, you didn't have time to start a fire and heat up some tea or dinner. So consuming something warm or cool can help the primitive brain feel safer.
Now you can do this before you start tapping, in the middle of the tapping session inside your imagination, or after. It doesn't matter, but the idea here is that you're changing the energy from one which was unsafe and traumatic to one that is moving towards safety. And again, moving towards safety from the person who was traumatized perspective. You
Mhm.
may know that it's safe, but that's the point, isn't it? That you know that things have moved on, but a part of you is still feeling threatened, still feeling unsafe. And so, this process, if you were to sum it up, is about bringing safety to a part of us that is still vibrating in terror or unsafety. And
And
we
it,
use tapping to do that because it includes the body, it includes comforting words. Even though I feel scared to shaking, I am still a good kid. Those types of words can be so healing
mhm.
when they are said even in our imagination to our inner child.
And you can give them all these comforting things and activities energetically in your imagination. You don't necessarily have to go out and buy a teddy bear unless that feels right to you.
Right.
So, with the child's permission, imagine tapping on her or him while you tap on your physical body. And use a language that's comfortable to the child. Don't push them any faster than they want to move. At first, saying, even though this happened, I'm a wonderful, lovable child, may be impossible. Saying, I am open to feeling a little bit better might be easier.
That's one of the things that whether you're doing regular tapping, EFT, or not, if the setup statement is not one that you can accept, for example, I deeply and completely accept myself, if that is a zero, if that is just absolutely not something that you can say, I am open to the impossibility of accepting myself.
Mm,
Even though I'm being treated so badly right now, I'm open to the possibility I'm a good kid.
yes. And one of the most productive uses of tapping we've found is to offer acknowledgement to the child, to thank them for holding this painful energy, for doing the best they could, for being really smart and resourceful. They did survive. If you can help them connect with your good qualities, they start feeling more empowered and willing to change.
It's interesting how many times after an inner tapping session where we relate to our traumatized self with respect
Hmm.
and acknowledgement and reflecting back to that child the qualities that we now see as an adult that we had. You start feeling them yourself as an adult more. You're reclaiming those energies. If you were told you're a bad boy,
Hmm.
and even though I was told I was a bad boy, I must be. I I'm a good boy now.
Yeah.
Okay. And as you shift that, you can start feeling that feeling even at 55 or 80. I'm a good boy. It can return to you. And that's again part of this process is returning and reclaiming those empowered feelings of, yeah, I am smart. Yeah, I am brave. Yes, I am a good person.
I love at the end of a lot of sessions, people say they just feel warm and connected, floating on air kind of feelings, and it's beautiful.
Yes.
It's important to tap on what the child is actually feeling. So, to follow through with our example, you might try, even though mommy got in trouble and daddy was mad, maybe I'm okay. And even though I was so scared and alone, I have someone paying attention to me right now, and I'd like to feel better.
Yeah. And again, include comfort as much as feels appropriate. You're not using comfort to avoid the actual feelings,
Mm.
though. If you're just trying to fix the child by, well, here, have a chocolate chip cookie and some milk. No, that's not what it's about. It's about waiting and paying attention. And this is where professional help, when you're learning this technique for the first time, can help because you get the sense of, no, this is not something that you try to fix in 30 seconds. You're paying time. And while this may be a lot faster than anything else we've seen for releasing trauma, you're not trying to rush it. You are being fully present with the emotions that are in the memory, including whatever they are.
Yes. You can ask the younger self what he or she wants and give that to them. Getting what we really want, it can open parts of ourselves up to the universe. And by law of attraction, when we start feeling like we can get what we want, we start attracting more of that.
Okay, so if you reach a point where your inner child is bored with the process or wants to go off and rest and play, that's a good sign. That's a sign that the trauma has been released to a great extent and it's time to rest, digest, heal, integrate the energy.
If the intensity stops shifting but it hasn't been reduced all the way, step back and notice what else has intensity in the memory. Is the mother or father still feeling off? Is she feeling nervous when she looks at them? Is it the teddy bear? Is it something else in the room?
It's interesting how many clients like the idea and responded very quickly. The child will feel better, but knows that daddy's in distress.
Yes.
And if they imagine daddy going off to tap with Rick or Kathy,
Yes.
well, now they can go out and play because everything's been taken care of. So if you're the type of person as an adult who learned as a child to be responsible for everyone else's emotions, feel free to have Rick and Kathy go off and tap with mommy, daddy, uncle, uh, whoever.
The
It's
teddy
okay.
bear?
There's
Yeah.
no extra charge. You're welcome to use us in your imagination as the assigned people to go off and help them, and we would be happy to do so.
And you can pull in someone else, anyone else you feel connected to. If Carol Look or Gary Craig or Pat Carrington are your favorite people, have them do some tapping energetically for you.
So just to reiterate, we're not just tapping on the inner child or younger you. You're tapping on any aspects of the memory that have intensity. If the memory is your dad yelling at you because of the dog, tap on the younger you, your dad, or even on the dog. What was the dog's reaction? Is the child comfortable with how the dog feels?
I once had to tap on a coin that got lost when I was very young. Children often personalize objects around them. So, as a young child, I thought that the coin decided to leave me, and I wasn't very comfortable around money. I didn't expect it to stay with me. Once I tapped on that coin, the memory didn't have any charge anymore, and I started dealing differently with money.
Some people may be concerned about tapping on other people without their permission, even in their head. Well, when you're doing this type of tapping, you're actually tapping on the internalized memory of the person, obviously, not the person themselves. And you're shifting the mirror neurons in your own head.
I think it's really important to be honest and say how you feel, no matter how bad it is. That helps the energy shift more quickly. If you don't feel like it's right to say that you hate your father at a particular moment, you're going to still hold on to that energy. You're just tapping on the internalized dad, not the dad that lives in the world or may have passed on. You're tapping on the mirror neurons storage of your dad.
One of the blessings of this type of work is we've had people tapping in their internalized memory of their parent or even their abuser. And when the tapping is done, there's a feeling of catharsis, a feeling that I have brought relief to myself, I have spoken my truth. And in that way, if it is someone who you have another relationship that's outside of the trauma, like there's a love relationship between me and my father, if I tap on the trauma that existed in that moment, well, now the love relationship is much bigger. I'm less likely to feel like I'm waiting for the trauma to come again.
Yes.
And that feeling that you're just waiting for your father to hurt you can exist well beyond the time when he's left his physical body.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the clues that led many of us to look at, well, what keeps that feeling alive long after the physical threat is gone? These mirror neurons. And by tapping, we're literally changing your relationship, not only with other people that remind you of your father or whoever it was that hurt you, but also with that person in spirit.
And make sure you feel safe. If you feel like being honest about hating your father might bring some kind of repercussion, you can do different things to allow yourself to feel safe. You can make sure your dad's not in the room. So, as we were saying, have the inner child watch or tap on the other person as it feels safe. Don't make them. If they don't want you or a coach or a friend to tap on the person, that's fine.
And
Sorry.
imagine tapping on that other person while you're tapping on your physical self. And as always, you're monitoring as you would a wise, mature adult with a child who has been through a lot. You're wanting to create a safe space. So everything that you can do to help that inner child feel safe during the process, do that. As we mentioned, it can be bulletproof glass, it can be moving them to a fantasy world. It can be anything that allows your internalized memory to take a breath and feel, okay, I'm a little more safe now.
Yes.
Coming from a 10 to a 9 is a good sign.
Even a small shift can make a huge difference. It's also important to match the energy of the tapping to what the child is feeling. If they're very mad at the person, let them use a loud voice or call them names.
If they want to comfort the person, allow that too. Like we said, relationships are complex things, and there can be love and unsafety in the same room.
Yes. So, for an example, if you were tapping on the dad from our analogy about the teddy bear, you could say, even though you yelled at me about my toy, and that made me really sad and confused, I'd like to understand why.
We like to acknowledge the frozen question. What is the frozen question? That if there's a reperception that's possible, that can free up your brain to restructure it. And I'll tell you, sometimes when people are doing inner tapping, they feel a lot going on in their head as things are being rewired, reswizzled to create a new perspective, a new, more mature adult perspective.
Yes. And see what other questions, thoughts, or beliefs that come up while you're doing this tapping and just work through them. Often the emotions will be the best guide on where you need to go. Sometimes, even after some work, the child will need more tapping, or there might be energy stored in the teddy bear, for example. Ask her where the energy is, and then ask her if she wants to tap on the teddy bear or if she wants someone else to do it. If it's a yes for her to tap on the bear, phrases you might use could go, Teddy bear, I'm really sorry I blamed you and I got so angry at you. Thank you for all the times you were there for me. I really love you.
As with any tapping that we do, if you're in a story, it's going to unfold in different ways. We don't set a formula. We encourage you not to either. It may be a case where you address a certain aspect of what's going on, knowing that there's a lot more, but the child wants to go out and play. Traumas often have many different aspects, and anyone who's doing energy tapping becomes aware of that pretty quickly. There can be sadness and unsafety. There can be anger, and there can be regret. There can be grief. All of those different emotions may be present. You may be aware of that within yourself, but allow it to unfold. Allow the inner child to guide what you do and how you tap. Ask them what would make them feel more safe, what would help them feel like they have a choice. What would you like to do? That kind of simple question may be the way that you get an insight into yourself that has eluded you for a long time.
It's often helpful, too, to offer them a new task. They've been very busy holding the sphere, trying to protect you all this time. A lot of times they don't want to just be pushed off without anything to do. And they have all these skills. So you can ask them to help you with something. For example, if a part of you has been looking out for ways you could get hurt all this time, you could ask them to help you notice abundance in your life or opportunities for love.
So, how does this work with the law of attraction, Kathy?
Well, when we have all those old traumas stored in our subconscious, they are playing all the time in now. They send out a vibration 24/7, affecting how abundant and happy we feel.
What we notice is that when you shift, the feelings and beliefs around those powerful incidents, you shift your vibration in fundamental ways, ways that just thinking differently don't seem to give us access to. These vibrations are core to us. They are part of our programming. They're part of how we interpret people in our lives, people who, quote, love us, and situations that are safe to feel good in. For many people, that's been confused energetically
Hmm.
by old traumas. Your situation today, from an objective standpoint, may be quite blessed. You may have safety and warmth and a roof over your head and adequate food, the basic blessings of life, and yet not feel it,
Hmm.
not feel safe, not feel like there's enough. And if those vibrations are active in you and you haven't been able to figure them out, and you feel them, ask, what does this remind me of? And it may remind you of something that is one of those things that, gosh, I really would rather not think about that. And some people believe that the law of attraction is about never thinking about the negative things. Well, that's probably useful if you don't have a way to shift those feelings. Why activate them again and again and again? But what we're saying is that through techniques like this, and this is not the only one, but through a method like this, you can activate the energy in a way that empowers you and shifts it on a permanent basis. And that's worth doing because otherwise it's still going to keep vibrating there. And that's one of the reasons why removing these blocks will help you get what you like because you'll be safe allowing it.
Yeah. You may find suddenly you have a lot of energy and focus without all the procrastination, resistance, or hesitation you've been feeling in the past. You can just flow towards what you want so much easier. We can also tap on future beings. Say that you have a constant worry in your head of how abundant you'll be when you are 60. You can imagine tapping on that future you and release the energy around that so that that part of you can feel much more abundant and safe. And when you think of your future, you're not feeling dread and worry. If you envision losing weight and having someone come into your life who will hurt you, or gaining money and having someone coming to leech off of you, you can tap on those future beings that you keep imagining. In your head, just go ahead and tap on them and tell them exactly what you think. That can give you different options and you might see different and more appealing choices. Whatever kind of tapping we do, whether it's future, past, now, it's all about restoring an empowered energy for you.
Well, Kathy and I thank you for listening, and we hope that you found this helpful and has gotten your curiosity up. Team members have access to additional information on inner tapping, recordings of us doing inner tapping work to release traumas. And if you're looking for coaching support for yourself and you're not yet a team member, we invite you to check us out at thrivingnow.com/team.
Whether you work with us or someone else or do it yourself, we hope you find abundance and joy in your life.